afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. I'm going to crack straight on because I'm sure you've all had a really busy day today. So welcome to session 5. This is the Writing Framework webinar focused on composition. So I'm Katie Armstrong. I lead Flying High English Hub. Thank you for joining us today. We are recording this session, so if you want to keep your camera off, that's absolutely fine, and you will get a copy of the recording at the end. So as we know, the Writing Framework is non-statutory guidance that articulates a common approach to teaching writing. We know it's rooted in evidence and existing good practice. And as I said, today we're focusing on composition. And just a little note before we start, including note-taking, answering questions, writing to support their learning, focusing specifically on the teaching of writing during writing lessons that will enable us to meet the composition requirements of the national curriculum. Let's crack on. So if you've been on previous webinars, you'll have seen this diagram view of reading that described reading as the product of decoding and language comprehension, and we've similarly got the simple view of where writing is described as the product of transcription skills, so things like spelling and handwriting, and composition. So using the vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation that's sometimes referred to as text generation. And we've got that simply summarised in the simple view of writing diagram that you can see on the screen. Just as we know that decoding on its own is sufficient to develop writing. As the simple view of writing shows, writing depends on articulating ideas and structuring them. The national curriculum describes this as composition. And the programme of study for writing at Key Stages 1 and 2 is divided into 2 sections, transcription and composition. And it's essential that we teach children to develop competence in both of these dimensions. We know that spoken language is really important. So it's just as important for writing as it is for reading. Children's first encounters with language are typically through talk, and children depend on interactions with adults to develop their speech. And through exposure to stories and back and forth talk exchanges, they develop control over spoken language. It is essential that children are first taught how to engage in dialogue that enhances learning. So how to think critically, how to articulate their ideas clearly, and engage constructively with other people, and use clear structures and routines that are put in place and modelled by the teachers. Talk itself can help pupils to build their understanding of written language and how sentences are formed. However, we know that writing is not merely talk written down. Learning to write involves developing control of language in a way that increasingly is different from everyday conversational speech and must be taught explicitly. We know that the structures of writing are generally both longer and more complex than what we use when we're speaking. Writing draws on vocabulary which often extends far beyond that we normally speak. And we do require that extending that vocabulary and having a mastery of the whole range of punctuation conventions that just don't exist when we speak. Pupils need to be taught about these written structures and how to use them accurately and effectively. The national curriculum reflects this, requiring that pupils are taught to distinguish between the language of speech and writing. The following slides will provide examples of how teaching can effectively distinguish between the two. So there are tools that we can use to support developing spoken language. One of them is Language Screen, which should pop up on my screen, but is now not coming up. There we go. So Language Screen is included as part of the DFE funding. It's a simple digital assessment. It's administered in less than 10 minutes by teaching assistants or teachers to assess children's speaking and listening skills. Language Screen is the very best way to select children for the NELLI programme and enables schools to monitor children's oral language developments accurately. And then we also have the NELLI programme itself. So the NELLI programme provides schools with a way of identifying early language difficulties and is proven to improve children's language skills and behaviour in school. It's a 20-week intervention to build children's vocabulary, listening and storytelling skills through targeted small group and individual sessions. In the early stages of learning to write, sentence level composition should be carried out orally. So it's very clear in the writing framework how the early stages of learning to write, particularly while children are still developing the transcription skills they need to write their ideas down, that sentence level composition should be carried out orally. Visual prompts, such as images from a storybook or photographs, alongside sentence stems, can support children to organise their spoken language into structures that are suitable for written language. Even when pupils are able to transcribe effectively, oral composition still has value. Composing orally before writing reduces the cognitive demand when pupils transcribe the phrase or sentence, because they've already formulated their ideas and made the choices they need to make about the sentence structure and the vocabulary they're going to include. It also gives them the opportunity to test ideas before writing them down. Generally, pupils orally compose only a sentence at a time and should practice oral composition regularly. The aim is for the process of formulating text before writing it down to move from oral composition to something that children do in their heads before putting pencil to paper. Teachers should model oral composition, demonstrating their thought processes when writing. Modelled writing requires the teacher to take the lead while pupils observe an expert writer. This provides the opportunity for the teacher to show, in small steps, how to apply new knowledge. The teacher should think out loud, focusing pupils' attention on the choices of language and structure, helping them to understand the steps involved in problem solving and critical thinking. Teachers should support pupils' understanding of composition and particularly sentence construction by reading stories, talking to them, and providing oral models of appropriate sentence structure. This supports pupils to understand how a sentence sounds and how this informs a writer's choice. To further support this, if appropriate, teachers can think about using their pitch, the pitch of their voice, the timing, the prominence of certain words to indicate sentence boundaries and varied sentence types and structures. This is also known as prosody. For example, we might emphasise a question with a higher pitch at the end, or we may pause to indicate a comma or ellipsis for effect. We also need to explicitly model written language structures when we're speaking, such as rephrasing and extending what the pupils say, and provide pupils with sentence stems and frames to build a sentence orally and to link it to the written structure. Reading is vital in giving pupils examples of different sentence structures. The more pupils read or are read to, the wider their exposure to these different structures, with potential benefits to their writing. Teachers can maximise the benefit of integrating the reading of model texts into their teaching of writing and using this as an opportunity to guide pupils to notice and understand a variety of written language structures. This might include drawing attention to how sentences are constructed, their grammar, and their punctuation. However, care should be taken not to detract from pupils' reading enjoyment. It's important to clearly distinguish between when you're reading as a reader and when you're analysing text as a sentence level teaching, focusing on building understanding of how to construct sentences, should be an important component of any writing curriculum. It's the engine that propels pupils from writing the way they speak to using the structures of written language. Teaching well-formed sentences needs to be done step by step. Teachers may find that beginner writers compose multi-clause sentences without any specific instruction to do so. This should not be discouraged. However, to begin with, a teacher should focus on demonstrating single clause sentences. As soon as pupils become more proficient, they will have the tools and confidence to choose when to use different sentence structures. Should not be expected to produce extended pieces of writing until they are ready. Instead, they should be given ample opportunities to practice their basic sentence construction skills. Activities can be planned to support the mastery of sentences and encourage pupils to use sentence structures effectively and creatively. Specific guidance on these activities can be found in Appendix D of the Writing Framework Guidance. And as we've mentioned in these webinars before, children should not be expected to write at length before they are ready. We know that pupils need to master the foundations of writing, the handwriting, the spelling, and sentence structure before we ask them to write extended pieces. So we know that the Curriculum and Assessment Review stated that advanced and overtly theoretical grammar at Key Stage 2 does disengage pupils and, crucially, does not help them to write well. However, it did recognise that a thorough knowledge and understanding of grammar is crucial to success, not just in English, but across all subjects. Therefore, the review recommended that the grammatical content in the primary programmes of study should be reviewed and streamlined in order to place greater emphasis on content that supports pupils' ability to read and write effectively. And this will include a stronger focus on using and applying grammar rather than identifying theoretical constructs by name. The DFE agrees with the review's findings that there are opportunities to teach grammar in a way that better enables pupils to master the composition and to enable them to write well, and address the widespread concern that grammar is often taught in isolation rather than for the purpose of being used effectively in writing. Therefore, the DFE will review the grammar content in the primary curriculum and consider whether the sequencing of some of the content should be changed, including whether some of the more complex grammatical concepts should be moved up into Key Stage 3. This will mean that more time can be spent ensuring that grammar concepts at primary level are taught in a way that enables pupils to master them and use them in context. In addition, the STA, the Standards and Testing Agency, will review the grammar, punctuation and spelling assessment to address these concerns. The revised programmes of study will clarify any changes to the grammar and terminology to be taught in Key Stages 1 and 2. Just note that until the revised curriculum is in place, the current National Curriculum and Assessment Framework remain. So nothing has changed yet and nothing will change at the moment until we are given the new revised curriculum. So we still need to stick with the curriculum that we're currently teaching. Prioritising the teaching of grammar that helps pupils to master written sentences to convey meaning should be the focus in supporting children's writing development. It is worth emphasising that grammar teaching will improve writing only if pupils apply what they've been taught into their writing. Grammar instruction is most effective when taught in the context of a writing task, but with an explicit focus on the rules being learned so that pupils can make informed decisions about their writing. Pupils should be taught not only how to apply their grammatical knowledge to their writing, but also the effect that this grammar has. Encouraging them to consider the effect of their grammatical choices carefully will help the children to understand better the purpose of the grammar. Sentences aligned with the requirements related to grammar and punctuation in the current national curriculum can be found in Appendix E of the guidance. Again, it's worth reiterating that grammar instruction is most effective when it's taught in the context of a writing task. Focusing on test preparation can limit the development of skills and knowledge, stifling pupils' creativity and wider writing development. There is growing evidence that pupils' vocabulary can be built through robust, purposeful, explicit instruction. The EEF advises that schools extend vocabulary by explicitly teaching new words, providing repeated exposure to them, and providing opportunities for pupils to use them. I'm sure many of you have seen this work before, but Beck and her colleagues broadly categorise words into 3 tiers. Tier 1 are words that rarely require instructional attention, as pupils are exposed to them at a high frequency from a very early age. Tier 3 words are probably best learned when a specific need arises, such as a science lesson or a history lesson if you're thinking about Egyptians. For example, you'd be talking about pyramids, sarcophagus, all those words that you'd only need in that specific context. Rich knowledge of words in the second tier, however, can have a powerful impact on verbal functioning. So instruction directed towards tier 2 words can be productive. There are a range of ways that we can teach vocabulary effectively. And if you refer to the EEF documents, there is lots of advice in there. And these include things like, but it's not limited to, providing a pupil-friendly explanation of the word definition. So instead of a dictionary definition, we're given a pupil-friendly definition in the context in which it's encountered. And then also enabling pupils to encounter the word in different ways. So that's linked to the children's experience in their talk, in their writing, and thinking about both literal and abstract meanings if they're available for that word. We might also look at the word's morphology and etymology. We can use visuals and images to help define the vocabulary to make sure that children have a really strong understanding of what it is. If a word can be used in lots of different contexts, it's worth discussing the context that you're talking about right now, but also exposing them to the different contexts that this word can be used in. The reading framework emphasises the importance of building a rich vocabulary that's then available to be drawn in writing. Children's books contain far richer language and vocabulary than children encounter in speech. The books that teachers read to children should therefore be chosen, amongst other things, with a view to widen their vocabulary. We know that writing is not a linear process. And the writing framework does stress the importance of understanding the different phases of the writing process: planning, drafting, revising, editing, and sharing. Pupils don't need to apply every phase of the writing process for all types of writing or at all times, and they will often move back and forth between the phases, altering their plans and revising as they go. However, even in the initial stages of composing, children will benefit from thinking about what they want to write, rereading to ensure clarity, and reading their work aloud to check for coherence. The writing process can be used with pupils of all ages, but the degree to which a pupil engages with each phase will vary depending on the nature of the task and the pupil's ages. In reception in Year 1, where the focus is on transcription, the writing process for composition is less relevant. However, generating ideas orally as a class offers a manageable planning process for sentence level composition. Or a teacher may encourage a pupil to say aloud what they're going to write about and share any writing they produce with their peers or parents and carers. The phases of the writing process can thus be applied in a light touch manner. In Year 2, the writing process is likely to be used only at the sentence level and may sometimes be completed orally. For example, a planning process may ask pupils to identify appropriate words for improving their sentence before their composition. Similarly, simple revisions can include strategies such as reading their sentence aloud to the class and receiving feedback on how they might improve it to make it more compelling for the reader. In Key Stage 2 is when pupils will begin to compose whole texts, and the process will become more developed, and pupils begin to understand that the process is not linear, with phases being returned to as part of the composition. For example, during the drafting of an argument, pupils might be encouraged to make planning stops, to check their writing includes the appropriate evidence before making revisions. As composition develops, they will increasingly make their own choices about the process they use to improve their writing. To help manage the cognitive demands of writing, it's really important that pupils write about topics with which they are already familiar. All writers dedicate time to researching, developing ideas, reading around the topic, and sometimes even visiting relevant settings. Before planning a piece of writing, pupils in Key Stage 2 should be provided with opportunities to research and develop their ideas, build a vocabulary bank, and practice relevant sentence structures. This research and preparation will significantly influence the quality of their writing. Pupils who are expected to write with minimal preparation are unlikely to succeed. The writing framework goes through each stage of the writing process and provides examples of how this process can support pupils at each key stage. It also provides examples of how the writing process might look in different year groups dealing with the same topic, but the elements of the process remain the same. After learning to spell words and write sentences, pupils do not move smoothly into producing well-structured texts. However, once pupils have a good understanding of how to write a sentence, paragraphs can be composed with much greater ease. Teachers must help children move from writing individual sentences to creating coherent texts. Planning models that are consistent across the school should be used to support pupils to structure paragraphs and whole texts. This will assist pupils to bridge the gap and help them to acquire appropriate mental representations of different text structures that serve different purposes. Pupils should not be rushed to produce lengthy texts, but encouraged and given the time to draft well-honed paragraphs that convey single ideas, avoiding combining and confusing unrelated points. We know pupils will not always be motivated to write, but when they are, it makes a difference to the writing that they produce. One of the greatest influences on motivation is a pupil's self-belief. The most powerful driver of self-confidence is successful performance. If children's knowledge and skills are insufficient for an activity, it's likely to cause frustration. Therefore, children need to be taught effectively with timely, supportive and constructive feedback. They need to be given opportunities to develop competency over time. And they need to be given tasks that match the knowledge and skills that they have been taught so far. While developing foundational skills builds much needed confidence, purposeful and enjoyable writing experiences can also foster their motivation. Writing tasks that are interesting and meaningful can motivate pupils. Ideally, pupils will be interested in the topic they're writing about because they have knowledge of it, perhaps because they've been taught about the Romans or because they're writing about their granny's cooking, so they have knowledge that they can use to write with. Research indicates that young people can enjoy writing and be more motivated to write when they make choices about what they write. The choices differ by age and stage of learning. While developing writers will need scaffolds and supports to write accurately and confidently, they can still have agency to make choices within those structures, that is, about what they want to write and how they are going to express it. However, while providing choice can be motivating for pupils, it can also create additional pressure. Some pupils may feel safer being given a task to complete, particularly novice writers or those with special educational needs and disabilities. We know that high quality teaching is central to ensuring that all pupils are given the best possible opportunity to achieve. But we also know that some pupils may find it more difficult than others to make progress in writing, and teachers should consider how to adapt their practice and provide the support, if I get my words out, provide the support that might be needed. Schools should aim to provide this support within the writing lesson. So as much as possible, we're keeping all children in the writing lesson and providing the support in that lesson. Teachers, working with other professionals if needed, should investigate why a pupil is finding writing difficult. For example, whether they have a hearing or visual impairment, or speech, language and communication need, or a specific learning difficulty. However, many pupils experience difficulties when learning to write, regardless of whether they have an identified SEND. While diagnostic labels may be useful, evidence suggests that writing difficulties are similar across pupils with and without disabilities. When specific instructional choices have to be made, teachers will need to move beyond diagnostic labels and identify the areas in the writing process that are challenging the pupil. So what is it that this child is finding hard? Accurate targeting of intervention requires that the pupil's difficulties can be reliably ascertained. Teachers should try to understand what aspect of writing a pupil finds difficult. Is it their handwriting? Is it knowledge of GPCs to use for spelling? Is it other aspects of spelling? Is it sentence structure? Is it the grammar knowledge? Is it the composition skills or the language they've got to use? What is it specifically for this child that they are struggling with? We need to know what that is before we can do something about it. Teachers should aim to tackle the aspect of writing that a pupil finds difficult and tackle individual needs in whole class teaching. This will make sure that pupils are included and it avoids them missing out on other areas of the curriculum. This individualised approach should support the consolidation of their prior learning. There may be circumstances where individual support, separate from whole class teaching, is required. For example, a child joining a school in Year 5 who is unable to form letters accurately may be given appropriate support to learn and practice letter formation. This should be carefully considered. Pupils may struggle with composition at any or all phases of the writing process. For example, they may struggle to write sentences and make their writing understood, to combine sentences, or to formulate and organise their ideas. Support could include, for example, providing additional scaffolding, such as sentence stems, and longer or increased opportunities for oral rehearsal. Additionally, using recording devices can help pupils to play back their work in stages as they write. These can be particularly useful when problems with working memory mean a pupil forgets the beginning of a sentence or paragraph that they've composed in their head. Effective teaching and feedback. We know that writing is demanding, and it's important to teach pupils strategies to help them manage it. There are lots of different teaching approaches that we can use. The explicit teaching of many of these writing strategies has been shown to be effective to help pupils improve writing and is associated with highly effective teaching. A range of strategies has been referred to throughout this presentation, such as generating ideas for writing, oral composition, and using visuals to support cognitive load. Teaching approaches that allow a slow release of responsibility from the teacher to the pupil have also been shown to be effective. Useful approaches include modelled writing, I do, shared writing, we do, so we compose something together, and then independent writing, you do. We can also include guided writing where a teacher or an adult might support a group of children. Modelling is well supported by evidence. Showing what skilled writers do is a vital part of teaching. Pupils need to have the whole process demonstrated for them and see the struggle, the thinking, the pondering and the messiness of writing. Teachers should think aloud, focusing pupils' attention on the choices of language that they're making and the structure, helping the children to understand the steps involved in problem solving and critical thinking. It enables the children to sit beside the author and study how that text is being constructed and how it communicates. Modelled and shared writing allows pupils to gain confidence when writing independently. When writing independently, pupils still need to be provided with enough support so that they can successfully complete tasks. Providing scaffolds that are gradually removed over time, such as checklists, can be useful. Pupils do require regular, frequent and timely feedback about their writing, with the opportunity to review and edit it. The more frequent the feedback is, and the closer it is to the opportunity to edit, the more it improves writing. Feedback needs to be encouraging, but something that pupils can act upon. It may tackle sentence level issues or broader than written. It can be provided throughout the writing process. We don't just have to wait till the end. It's specific to the writing task rather than a general comment. So we need to really identify what's working well, but what it is that the children can do to improve this piece. And it needs to be supportive and encouraging, but always giving a reason. Okay, next steps for you. If you've joined me on these webinars before, you'll have seen this little flowchart before. We know that the writing framework is the DFE's first step in a longer term strategy to support schools to improve teaching writing and attainment. We know it will take time for schools to plan and implement the changes that might be needed to have a longer term impact. So as leaders, we need to ensure that staff attend the subsequent writing framework webinars for further implementation advice and support. And teachers should be using the audits within the framework to evaluate their current classroom practice and use the guidance, particularly the appendices, to support their teaching practice. There have been 4 other webinars so far. If you have missed any of them, please do drop us an email and we can send you the recordings and share those with you. And there is one more webinar to come, which focuses on supporting those children who need extra support. So please do join us for that one. I hope you found this useful this evening, and I hope to see you all soon. Thanks for joining us.